Hello, welcome again to Benchwarmers, joined this week by David Brown, just back from a coastal vacation. How are you?
Yes, came back just for you, Tom.
Thank you, I appreciate that. We're going to get to a lot of NSIC stuff that David covers on a regular basis, some Augustana hockey as well. Big NBA fan.
Yes.
Golden State, were they the best team this year, or did they just win the championship?
They were the best team.
Really?
Their seeding didn't matter. They had depth. They had guys step up when they needed to. It's all about the role players. People think it's about the superstars. It's about the role players. When you have guys like Gary Payton II, Otto Porter, Andrew Wiggins, you could even call him a role player who stepped his game up tremendously. And it hurts me to say that as a Wolves fan, but he did.
Wiggins, though. Yes.
He did well. But when you have that depth and then you have Steph doing his thing, I mean, it was easy to see they were the best team.
All right, a lot to get to here. As we said, Augustana hockey getting ready for their season coming up, not this fall, but the fall following. But did find a conference home recently, and did that kind of work out the way you thought it was?
I think that was kind of always the hope of Augustana was the CCHA. We'll delve a little more into it, but they had always believed that that was the right conference for them.
All right, and then the NSIC, the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference. Football's only 10 weeks away, man.
Yep.
And basketball always big, couple new coaches, kind of big coaching changes in the NSIC, weren't there?
Yep, MSU Moorhead, probably the biggest one, but yeah, lots of moving and shaking around all parts of the NSIC.
All right, we will get to all of that. We will get to the heart of Augustana hockey first of all. When we come back, why did they make the big move into a new sport for the school?
Thanks for watching Benchwarmers, presented by Avera Orthopedics.
Welcome back to Benchwarmers, joined this week by David Brown. Going to talk some Northern Sun stuff coming up. But Augustana hockey, David's been all over it since the school made the announcement that they're going to go Division I in hockey. And, you know, sitting here in Sioux Falls, and there's college hockey, Division I college hockey, all around us.
Yep.
And there wasn't any here until now, and they don't start till next fall. But this seems like a very savvy move by the school, right?
It was kind of a pivot from what their initial hopes were, was to become a member of the Summit League, if you remember all those years ago. When the Summit League declined to extend an invitation to them, they were trying to think of other ways to make sure they accomplished their goal, their 2030 goal that they call it, of becoming a Division I athletic school. And hockey was something they had thought about for years, but it became more serious after the Summit League denied them that invitation.
All right, and head coach Garrett Raboyne has been out on the road already recruiting. He's kind of in a weird situation where he's not really signing guys yet because they don't start playing for another year and a half, right?
No, he did have one player commit on Twitter a couple days ago. But yeah, it's this kind of weird situation where you're committing to something that you really don't know what it is going to be yet. And I think that's both exciting and a little bit daunting, but Coach Raboyne is approaching it with the right attitude.
And he left an assistant job at the University of Minnesota to come take this job, right?
Yeah, it shows the belief that they have in both him, Augustana's belief in Coach Rabs, and also Coach Rabs' belief in starting this program here in Sioux Falls.
All right, here's a little bit from Coach Garrett Raboyne on taking over as the Augustana hockey coach.
It's been something that college hockey's needed for a long time. Teams have been flying over Sioux Falls to go play the Denvers, the Omahas, and this is such an incredible city. It's booming here. Augustana University has the incredible academic reputation, and now with athletics and Division I hockey coming, it couldn't be more exciting.
All right, he's ready to roll. And as you touched on it a little bit, but you get down to the why did they pursue this in the first place? And it seemed like things weren't working out for the school as far as Division I in a lot of ways, but this really did.
It did, and as you mentioned, the word you used a little bit earlier was savvy, and it was savvy. There is no Division I hockey program in South Dakota, at least not until Augustana decided to make themselves the first one, but it's a way to get themselves on the map and to recruit a fan base that quite honestly has not had anyone to cheer for in South Dakota on a collegiate level in a long, long time. There's lots of Sioux Falls Stampede fans, of course, that's junior hockey. They've always had good attendance and a good rapport with the fan base, but now you can get college hockey guys to come here. And keep in mind, there's only 60 Division I hockey teams. This is very rare. It's not like other sports where there's 300 plus teams. Augustana is going to be either the 60th or 61st, depending on the order they recognize, Division I collegiate hockey team. So this is, as you said, a savvy move by them, not only to up the school's profile, but to eventually do what they really want to do and be a full-fledged Division I athletic program.
All right, Midco Arena is underway. Yes. It's in the works right on campus there. What's been going on elsewhere on the hockey scene at Augie in the last couple of months or so.
Midco Arena, as you mentioned, construction has started on that. They had a couple goals. Get the arena started, get a coach. They got Coach Rabs back in April, and then find a conference, CCHA, Central Collegiate Hockey Association, which just restarted. It became defunct for a couple years. It's restarted. It's got teams like St. Thomas, Bemidji State, Minnesota State, schools that are familiar and within the geographic footprint of Augustana. But what's interesting to me is this was just a concept, literally a year ago. This got solidified, as Stephanie Herseth-Sandlin told us in a Midco Mag piece. This got solidified commencement of May 2021, and now we've been a little more than a year since then. They've started a team, they have the funding, they have a coach, they have a conference, they have a building. It's really cool to see how all these things have come together, and they're still more than a year away from first puck drop.
And athletic director Josh Morton had a hockey background, and that has played a part in all of that. Here is Augustana AD Josh Morton.
Now some of the nitty-gritty things about, hiring the assistant coach, what does our support staff look like, all those things that come into play, and scheduling still. We still have to finalizing that first year, that second year scheduling are going to be huge for us too.
Schedule is going to be a big deal, but what else are they working on as we get later into the summer here of 2022?
You heard him mention an assistant coach. They got that. Andy Bichetto comes in from Colgate, so they have at least one assistant coach on the roster right now. And basically, it's recruiting. We actually invited Garrett Raboin to be on the show this week. He said, sorry, I'm out recruiting this week, so I can't make it this specific week. But they're full throttle ahead. They're pedal to the metal, whatever cliche you want to use. They are using every opportunity to make sure they are ready to go in October 2023. You mentioned the scheduling portion. Joining the conference takes care of a lot of scheduling issues. It's tough to schedule, as most college coaches will tell you, in any sport at any level, to get teams to come here to try to find road opponents. And now that they have a conference, they at least know 16 of their games for their first season.
All right. August, not September, October of 2023, I think, is when the puck officially drops for Augustana hockey. So going to be an exciting year building up to that. And when we come back on Benchwarmers, Northern Sun basketball, the best Division II conference in the country. We all think so. We always talk about it, but David has some updates on Duluth and Augustana and Northern State, some NSIC hoops coming up. Welcome back to Benchwarmers. Let's talk about some Northern Sun Intercollegiate basketball with David Brown, and start with the women, David. And Minnesota Duluth has been really good in the last 3 or 4 years. Mandy Pearson is still there. We always talk about her whenever there's a coaching opening, but they are 66-9 in the conference under Mandy Pearson in the last 4 seasons, and Duluth has really got it going, don't they?
They really do. They've won 3 of the last 4 conference tournament championships, and the 4th one they lost in the tournament title to St. Cloud State. So they're really good. They've won some NCAA tournament games. Taking that next step is kind of, I guess, the next goal. It's not enough just to win the conference tournament. They want to make some noise in the NCAA tournament. They've come close. They've played some really good teams really well, but Brooke Olson, I think, is coming back. She was technically listed as a senior, but it was only her 4th year of basketball, so she does have that extra year if she wants to come back. 3-time NSIC Player of the Year. They lose a lot of other seniors who played good role parts, but if you get Brooke Olson back, then Minnesota Duluth is easily the favorite for me next year.
Duluth and St. Cloud both went to the D2 National Tournament last year, right? St. Cloud actually won a game. Talk about Lori Fish, who's done a great job as the coach there, but those two teams kind of have been going back and forth in that NSIC tournament championship for a couple of years, right? Duluth and St. Cloud. Yeah,
they've alternated tournament titles each of the last 3 years. They've been the matchup in the NSIC tournament title each of the last 3 years. But yeah, with St. Cloud, they lose a bunch of their senior leadership, so it might be a little bit tougher for the Huskies to reclaim something in the 2022-23 season. But as you mentioned, don't count Lori Fish out. I mean, obviously everyone knows her from her time at South Dakota State and Minnesota State when she coached there, but good defensive principles, and defense will always keep you in a game no matter how bad your shooting is. At least I would think you'd know that.
Yeah, she was a heck of a player at SDSU, yes. Augustana and Sioux Falls. What's going on with the Vikings and the Cougs? Both lost in the first round of the NSIC tournament last year, but they're always contenders, but have they not been up to, obviously, St. Cloud and Duluth standards in the last couple of years?
They haven't. With Augustana in particular, it's always interesting because they have so much talent. Their shooting is just abysmal sometimes. They like to get out and run and be in transition, but they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams. They shoot a lot of threes. They keep themselves in game. They have a good offense, but they don't make a lot of threes. If they can get a little more consistent from outside, they'll be right back in it. They have good players. Ashlyn Duffy, another in the famous line of Duffy players who has been really, really good. Lauren Sees, who people remember from Avon High School. She's a great point guard. So they got some talent there. It's kind of all about piecing it together. And then Sioux Falls, they lost Anna Brecht before the start of the season. If everyone remembers her from Sioux Falls Lincoln, Green Bay Division I transfer. Had a hip injury beginning of the season, so USF had to replace 18 points per game last season. They still finished third in the South Division, had a top 5 offense and defense, but just ran into a U-Mary team that shot the lights out in that one game in the NSIC tournament.
All right, but Minnesota Duluth could be really good again.
I think Minnesota Duluth is going to be good again. Minnesota State in Mankato, another team that I think is really, really good and can contend because they just play such hellacious defense, force 24 turnovers a game. So Minnesota Duluth, Minnesota State would be my 2 picks to be favorites for next season on the women's side.
Okay. What about the men? Northern State. Talk about the Wolves a little bit. They've been hit by the transfer. Guys going up to play Division I from Northern State. But what's the outlet coming up for Northern State?
Well, this year was the first time in 5 years they did not win the NSIC tournament championship, but as you mentioned, they lost a bunch of guys to D1. Andrew Coleman went to North Dakota State, Mason Stark went to Northern Arizona, and everyone remembers Parker Fox went to Minnesota. Didn't play last year because of his knee injury, but 3 starters from 2 seasons ago all went to Division I schools. That's tough to overcome. This season, Northern State's only losing 1 starter. They got a lot of guys back, a lot of scoring back. Jordan Belka's going to grad school there, and he's going to come back and play again another year for Northern State. A good transfer in Sam Maston from Northern Colorado last year. And then their freshman, Jackson Money, he could probably transfer to wherever he wanted to. He is sticking around in Aberdeen. So Northern State's going to be really good again next season. Are they at the level that they were 3-4 years ago? Wouldn't say that yet, but I would not be surprised at all if they won the regular season or conference tournament title.
Money, as you said, he might have slipped under the radar a little bit.
Yes.
Big kid, like 6'10", from West Fargo, Cheyenne, and it was a little bit of a surprise last year, as good as he was, right?
A little bit of a surprise. Saul Phillips, he's always one for quotes. He's like, I don't know if I've had a better freshman. And that's, Saul says a lot of stuff, but that's still high praise coming from Coach Phillips.
All right, Minnesota State Moorhead won the NSIC tournament. Chad Walthall had been the head coach there since 2010, and he retires. Big, huge retirement in the Northern Sun, and they replace him, though, with a guy right on the bench, right?
Yep, Tim Bergstrasser right on the bench, keeps that continuity. I think people in Moorhead are happy with that decision. He's a young guy, early 30s, and speaking of young guy, Chad Walthall just retiring in his early 50s. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, but sometimes when you know it's time, it's time. And I think that the seamless transition of moving Tim up to the head job keeps a lot of the same guys there. Most of their roster is coming back, so they can make another run again. I think this is a good move for MSU Moorhead.
Moorhead's kind of had it rolling. They got nice facilities there. They've had some really good years, and we'll see if Bergstrasser keeps it going there. Augustana, meanwhile, lost the regional final to eventual national champion, Northwest Missouri State again. Is Adam Dykman done?
Yes, he's officially done. A lot of people go to college for 7 years. He will not have an 8th.
Love Adam. Tyler Reamersman, another great player. Is he done?
He is done as well. 4 of their 5 starters are going to graduate. So it'll be a bit of a transition year, but they've got a really, really good recruiting class. I know a lot of coaches say, oh, this is the best recruiting class we've ever had.
Everybody does.
All that stuff, but they have some legitimate good prospects, a lot of key guys from Minnesota, and then Caden Hinker, a kid from Mitchell High School, who's really, really good. It might take them a little bit to adjust to the college level, but Augustana is going to be good sooner rather than later again.
Yeah, Hinker got better and better at Mitchell High School, and it's going to be fun to watch him play. And then USF, Drew Giebert, one of their great all-time players, comes back as an assistant coach for one thing, but they were just 7-12 in the conference last year. What's going on at USF?
They just need scoring, plain and simple. Chris Johnson, I love him. He's a great coach, always preaches defense and rebounding. They're always a top rebounding team. They always hold opponents under 60, 65 points per game. The offense just hasn't kept up. They brought in Matt Cartwright this season, tried to get a little bit of rejuvenation out of him, but of course he's had a couple knee injuries, and he had some big scoring outbursts, some 30-point games, but it kind of leveled off toward the end of the season and just couldn't get any consistency going on offense. A couple kids left the program who were JUCO transfers. If they can get guys like a Drew Giebert, easier said than done, but guys who want the ball in their hands and can take it to the basket, create their own shot, even if they get one guy like that, 1 or 2 guys like that, they can be at the top of the conference again because they have a lot of good players who do a lot of individual things well, but none of them on the current roster are pure scorers. They need that pure scorer.
And there's always going to be 3 or 4 really good teams that you're going to have to beat anyway, but it's such a great conference because it's, guys like Hinker and Money that you get to see in high school, and then they get to play at a really, really high Division II level.
It's really fun. As you mentioned, the NSIC, one of the best conferences in all of Division II. You get to see that depth and that level of talent, and if they're good enough, they can go to Division I. We saw Parker Fox go to a Power 5 school, so you can reach Division I if you're an NSIC player, and vice versa. You might see some NAIA or JUCO players reach the NSIC level and surprise you some. So a lot of depth and talent at multiple levels, but the NSIC kind of gets the best of both worlds, and if you can encapsulate that in a current season, then you have a good shot of winning a championship.
All right, can't wait for that. When we come back, though, we're going to talk some Northern Sun football with David Brown. Going to be kicking off before we know it. Brownie's bets on some of the NSIC contenders in football coming up.
Benchwarmers on Midco Sports, presented by Avera Orthopedics.
Welcome back to Benchwarmers, talking NSIC football now with David Brown, and the NSIC season kicks off on September 1st. Going to be here before we know it. 14 teams in the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference. You play 11 games. They're all conference games. I kind of like that, where it means something right away from the first kick of the season, where you're not playing, these out-of-conference games. I don't know. I kind of like that. I don't know if you've talked to teams. Do they like that, or I don't know?
No.
They don't like it?
Only because of the strength of schedule and, playoff rankings.
Because you're jumping in right away and you got to win right away.
You jump in right away, got to win right away. I think most NSIC teams would like at least one non-conference opponent just for a strength of schedule purpose, because with everything being so insular, it cuts down on travel and stuff like that. But I think you talk to a majority of those 14 coaches, they would want one out-of-conference game.
Okay. From the outside looking in, it's a little more fun, I suppose, than the coaches, the way they look at it. But let's start with Bemidji State, Minnesota Duluth, Augustana, University of Sioux Falls. All went 9-2 in the conference last season. Those four, are they all kind of on the up, so to speak, right now?
I would say all four of them will be in contention again. Yeah, Bemidji State has a great quarterback in Brandon Alt. Minnesota Duluth, they always reload with a great rush defense, great rushing offense. USF, they kind of just need to get over that hump a little bit. They've kind of been teetering in that 7-4, 8-3 range, and making the first round of the playoffs and getting close, but not quite getting over it. And then Augustana, for the first time in a while, needs a quarterback. And so if they can find that QB, Augustana will be in that conversation again.
But it is tough, as you said. That's why all these games mean so much right away, because you can go 9-2 and not make the playoffs, right?
USF went famously 10-1 back in 2014 and did not make the playoffs. Of course, that was such an anomaly because they made it a couple of years later at 8-3. So it's a weird system. It kind of depends on what other teams are doing around you, but there is very little margin for error. I guess that would be one of the good things about playing, such a conference-only schedule, is that you really can only afford probably 2 losses at the most if you want to make the playoffs.
I think that makes it exciting. But go back to Augustana for a little bit. Won their side of the conference, lost a playoff game to Bemidji State, and a little deeper on Augustana.
Augustana, as I mentioned, for the first time in a while, they need a quarterback. They've kind of been blessed the past 8 years. They had Trey Hyde for 4 years. They had Kyle Sadler for the past 4 years. So now it's a matter of who's going to be the quarterback. And, they got some incumbents on the roster in backup positions like Connor Neal and Kelly Skolton. They brought in a kid from Montana State who started for them a couple of years ago, Casey Bauman. So that will be the big thing to watch in the fall for Augustana, is the quarterback situation, because they have most of their running backs back. They have most of their skill position guys back. And that defense has been lights out the past couple of seasons, especially. Mark Sipple, the defensive coordinator, who came from St. Cloud State after they disbanded their football program. He's done a wonderful job revamping this defense. They're one of the best run defenses in the country.
Quarterback at any level, doesn't matter. You can be good at every other spot, but you got to have a quarterback if you're going to go far, right?
I mean, as
doesn't matter.
Stupid and cliche as it is, if you have a quarterback, it masks a lot of your other problems, and especially, as you said, at this level. So if you can find the right guy, you can be great. But we've seen teams, I take a look at Upper Iowa, who had a great quarterback a couple of years ago, and Brent Lammers, they were in contention, middle of the pack, and, they haven't found that QB, and they've barely won 2-3 games each the past couple of years.
And if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. That's the other.
Unless you're Minnesota State. They've somehow been able to make a 2 QB system work the past couple of years. This past year was their worst in probably, a decade, but they didn't have 2 QBs last season, so maybe they'll go back to that 2 QB system.
But they're another one that traditionally Minnesota State has been really good, and they've fallen off a little bit in the last couple of years, trying to keep up with Duluth and Bemidji and these other teams, right?
Yeah, and the Sioux Falls teams especially, Augustana and USF, have poured a lot of resources into making sure they're competitive from a football standpoint. And now you got Northern State competing with them. Northern State is one of those teams that's going to be very interesting this upcoming season.
They got a new head coach.
Yep, Mike Schmidt, who's now in his third year, but second year coaching. He got hired right before the pandemic, so he went through a whole year without coaching any football games. But this first season of him coaching on the field was spectacular for NSU.
And a beautiful new stadium. They were 7-4. Northern State was 7-4 last year. Lost their last 2 games that hurt them going into playoff time. But they always have, it seems like, we talk about watching local kids and South Dakota kids that get to play college football at a high D2 level. It seems like Northern State always has a ton of guys on the roster from the Dakotas that come in there and make an impact.
And what's interesting is that Coach Mike Schmidt, wants more of them. Don't underestimate their win over Sioux Falls last season. They beat them 41-10. It ended up being a big factor in USF not making the playoffs. Northern State, as you mentioned, kind of faltered down the stretch from their perspective. But Coach Schmidt told me before the game, we want those kids from Sioux Falls to come to Northern State. So if we can match up with the USFs and the Augies of the world and show that we can beat them, that will look good to future Sioux Falls high school kids, because they want to develop that talent, not just in other parts, in the rural parts of South Dakota. They want Sioux Falls kids. He made no bones about it. And if they can get some more Sioux Falls kids over the coming years, they'll be steady.
Is it regionalized like that in the NSIC? Do Sioux Falls kids stay around USF and Augie, and Bemidji kids stay there, and Duluth kids stay there? Is it kind of like that?
I think for the Sioux Falls kids, yes. A lot of them will stick around to University of Sioux Falls or Augustana. You rarely see Sioux Falls kids migrate elsewhere. You see a couple at Northern, a couple at maybe MSU Moorhead, and maybe out into Minnesota State Mankato territory, but it doesn't really get beyond that. But Northern State wants more Sioux Falls kids, and if they can get them, they will be good for years to come.
Great opportunities for high school kids to play in the Northern Sun. All right, looking forward to the season. Appreciate it, David. Thanks a lot, man.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, when we come back, a little peek ahead to next week on Benchwarmers. Big thanks again to Avera Orthopedics. Our thanks to David Brown this week. Great stuff on the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference. Next week on Benchwarmers, Jody Norstedt takes over in Fargo with a look at North Dakota high school sports with Chase Miller and Brad Anderson. Have a great week.